Okay, in this video, we're gonna learn how to read some framing plans. So I have a wall that's built outside based on wall D, which I'm demoing. So it's a 12-foot long wall, and looking at the wall in elevation, which means like from a front view. So if you were a person, you would be right here looking at that wall. And the height of the wall is right around 8 feet, but not quite. So once again, here's our wall. Got all the other drawings on it. The header assembly right here is made out of two 2x10s, so there's one more behind it, but it doesn't go all the way through. And then a 2x6. Stacking underneath those are our trimmers. And so that's shown here and here. So a 2x10 header plus the 2x6 below it. It's right here. The trimmers on the sides that go all the way to the bottom plate are here and here. And then for this window, it also has a rough sill. And so that rough sill is right here. The cripples then supporting it are here, here, and here. So that's here, here, and here on the drawing. The king stud, which is also part of the ladder, is right here. And then same thing, this king stud going straight up to the top plate is also right here. And all of that becomes part of the window assembly. This is a good example of how the header's used to transfer the load, the weight. So the weight's above it, going all the way across. They typically transfer down the studs and into the plate and into the ground. But with a window, we don't want that weight to transfer into the window. It'll break the glass, it'll change the shape of the opening. So we put a nice strong header in between, allowing that weight to go transfer around the window into those trimmers and those king studs. And so ultimately the cripples are only supporting the weight of the window, nothing above it, because those are transferred around it. So all that framing is needed to put in a window. Now in order to have a wall that comes in perpendicular to this wall, we built a ladder. And so these are the ladder rungs, here, here, and here on the drawing. So here, here, and here. And then notice they're also made out of 2x6, so the depth matches the studs. And here's that other stud on the end, right here on the ladder, with the king stud being shared right there. Then we have just your normal typical studs. So I'm walking on them, 1, 2, 3. That would be right here. 1, 2, 3. And those come at 92 5/8 tall, which seems like an odd measurement, but it has a purpose for the way 8-foot sheet goods stack on top. After you add 1.5 inches for the bottom plate, which that bottom plate is right here. And then the top plate is just like the bottom plate, but it's on top right here. And then at the very end, we have our California corner. And so you can see that from the top view, that California corner is flush if we stand it up. This part of the corner is flush to the inside of the wall. So if we had another wall coming into it like this, then we can attach a nail through that flat piece into that other wall. And so that California corner has a piece that we can see its face. Once again, is flush to the inside, and then the like a typical stud. And so that's what we see right here. And all these become nailed together with a 2x6. You divide the 6x2, and so you get 3 nails put in. If we had 2x4 walls, it'd be 2 nails, because 4 divided by 2 gives you 2. So that's kind of a rough rule of thumb on how many nails to use. On a header, it's a 2x10, so you typically would use 5. I think we did 3 nails coming from one side and 2 going the other way as a way to do that. Now our plate markings, you can see that I give you a couple dimensions right off the bat. So to that first cripple stud is 2 foot 3 1/4. And so you would take your tape measure, and what you would do is measure from the edge that I'm dimensioning to that first cripple stud is 2 foot 3/4 inches. And that's where that cripple starts. And then from there, you can place a nail, and then we can measure 24 inches to get our 24-inch on center spacing. So if we went and placed the nail right on that mark that we had dimensioned, so once again, 2 foot 3/4. Now we could hook that nail, and you'll see every 2 feet we have another stud So here's our cripple, because we have a window there, so we can't fit a full height stud. And then from there, another 4 feet, we have our next stud. And then at 6 feet, we have another one. So this is every 2 feet on center, we have a stud at 8 foot, and then to cap off the wall. And then our other cripples, so like this one's here to keep our 24-inch on center spacing like I just showed you. But then our other ones just land on the left end of the rough sill and the right end of the rough sill. To know where our trimmers land and our king studs, basically those you saw, they didn't fit the typical spacing of 24 inches on center. So what we ended up doing is I gave you the dimension to the center of the window and how wide the window is. So at 3 foot 6 and 5/8 gets you to the center of the window from the left edge of the wall. So I can hook the left edge of the wall, so this bottom plate, and measure over 3 foot 6 and 5/8. So 3 foot 6, so 3 foot is 36 inches, plus 6 is 42, and then plus 5/8. So I'm gonna go and get a pencil. So 42 is 3 foot 6 and 5/8. So that's the center. So I'm gonna make a C on that. Now from that center mark, I can read that the window opening is 3 foot. So that means I can't have any boards inside of that 3 foot mark. So I'm gonna go and move out to 3 foot, which is 36 inches. Half of 36 is 18. And so at this line, right, is where that trimmer is gonna start. And then at 36 is where that next trimmer is gonna start. So there's my line, and there's that T, which stands for trimmer. And regular X is a full height stud. X with the circle is a cripple, which lands underneath the rough sill, and then a T stands for trimmer, which means it's going to go all the way up and connect underneath the header. Now these trimmers, it's important that I put those trimmers, those T's, to the outside of the line that I measured, right? If that was to the inside, I'd be making my window opening smaller. Okay, so if you're going to mark your plates, it's best to do it before you assemble everything. And actually that kind of goes without saying, because it's almost impossible to assemble everything if you don't mark your plates. Now, marking our plates, with this information, I can mark everything. So to start our 24-inch on center spacing, which is what all of our Habitat for Humanity walls are, the first stud, the first spacing for it, which is this cripple actually, is 2 foot and 3/4 of an inch over, and then it's 24-inch on center from there, like I showed before. From that, I would then go and layer in my my window assembly, and then I would mark where my ladder and my California corner are. So here I have 2 2x6s that are already cut to length, and I'm going to go and stand them on edge. And by doing this, and if I line up the ends of them, so this end grain with the other one, I can go and mark both top plate and bottom plate at once. So now that I have this and they're cut at the same length of 12 feet each, I'm going to go and measure over to where my on-center spacing starts, which is that first dimension that I give you, 2 foot and 3/4. So I'm going to go and pull my tape on here to 2 foot, and ignore this line, 2 foot and 3/4 of an inch. And so that starts my on-center spacing. Now, something to pay attention to as well is where that cripple is, which is right here. So that's to the right of that line. So I'm going to go and make an X to the right. And that means all of this 24-inch on center spacing is going to have an X to the right of it. So that's going to be an X there. And I'm going to go and transfer that line down. And so this is going to be an X. And in this case, it's going to be a cripple, but we'll mark that later. Now I'm going to go and toss in a nail real quick, like I showed you before. And now that I have that nail in, I put the edge of the nail on the edge of the line. I'm going to go and hook that, and we're just going to make a mark every 2 feet. So here I see 2 foot, make a mark, put an X on the right side. At 4 foot, put a mark, make an X on the right side. At 6 foot, put a mark, make an X on the right side. 8 foot, put a mark, put an X on the right side. And then since 10 foot is past the edge, we just put an X on the edge, and we're going to use this line instead of a marking. Then from there, we transfer these lines all the way up. So here, I'm just going to go put that on all the way up, all the way up, all the way up, all the way up. And at the ends, we don't need a marking. Of course, we're gonna have a board here, so we'll mark this end as well. Okay, so now that we have our 24-inch on center spacing, now we need to find the center of this window opening. And so to do that, I give you the dimension of 3 foot 6 and 5/8. So let's go find 3 foot 6 and 5/8 real quick. I'm gonna pull from the end 3 foot, which is 36, 6, so 42, and 5/8. Here's a half plus an eighth, 5/8. So this becomes our center mark right here. And so with that center mark, we'll just mark it all the way through. Okay, and now for that opening, that's 36 inches opening right here. We can see that 3 foot, 36 inches. And so to get that, we're just gonna split the difference of 3 foot. So if I go and measure out 36 inches, and I put half of 36, which is 18, on that center line, then I know that one mark is here, which is supposed to be this same line. So I can just go to that line. And then at 36, so right here. And now, since I know that needs to be an opening of 36 inches, I know I need my trimmer, which is underneath the window, to be on the right side of that line, so it doesn't block the opening. And then I need my trimmer to be on the left side of that line. Now that means that the header is going to be a little bit bigger, because it's going to be bigger than 36 by 1.5 inches on either side, because that header needs to sit on top of those trimmers that we just marked. So the header itself is going to be 3 foot plus 3 inches, because it has 1.5 inches to the right and to the left. So in order to get that right, I'm going to just measure over real quick 1.5 inches over, and then that becomes my header. And then on this side, where this trimmer was, I'm going to mark that line all the way through. And then I'm going to measure over 1.5 inches, so that way I know that header sticks on top of there. Now I could measure at 0 and mark 1.5, but sometimes it's easier to see where 2 is and go 1.5 inches from there. So it's still 1.5 inches long, it's just more clear to mark. So I'm going to go and drop that line down, and that becomes where this header is. And that means that there's going to be no cripple there. The center doesn't really matter. And so I just have this header that's going to go from here to here. And we could double check that being 3 foot 3 inches, which is the same thing as 36 plus 3, which is 39 inches. Okay, so that's my header. If you want to make it really clear, you can just draw that line all the way through to the header. So that's going to be on the top plate, is the header. Down below, anything underneath the header must be a cripple. So we're going to circle those X's, and then this one needs an X and a circle to represent the cripple that's at the end of that rough sill. So now we have the 3 cripples laid out to where they would land. We know where our header is going to land, we know where our trimmer is going to land, and then we know that there needs to be a full height king stud there, and then we know that there needs to be a king stud here as well. Now this one's going to have a ladder on this side, which we see right here. So the ladder rungs are at 1 foot 8 1/4, but we also know where the trimmer and the king stud are going to be. So really to mark out that ladder, I could just come in 3 inches from this line. 1.5 inches for the trimmer and 1.5 inches for the king stud would get me 3 inches from that line. So I can mark it at 3. Now with that mark at 3, I can go and just transfer that line down. And from here, if I really want to know, it's going to be 1.5 inches in. So 1.5 inches in from here. I can transfer that line down. And then we should find that our ladder inside here is what's dimensioned on the page. So we can double check. So I have my ladder, which should be, I'm reading 20 1/4, I think it is. If I put it at the 1, it should say 21 1/4. And so that's 20 1/4 in between, which 12 is 1 foot plus 8, 20 1/4. So we're all good. That's the same thing as 20 1/4. 1 foot 8 1/4 is the same thing. So then now I have basically everything laid out except for this California corner here. And so to do our California corner on the end, we're just going to put a CC, and this one is telling us from this top view that that California corner board needs to be flush to this side. So if we tip it up, it's going to be flush to the bottom. So CC, and then CC. And so now I know to put that California corner flush to the bottom when I put this stud on. And that's basically it. That's how I would mark out this wall to be framed. The header assembly I would build by 2 2x10s put together with the 2x6 on the bottom, all nailed together with 5 nails going through every 12 inches, and then same thing, a couple nails on the bottom. The nailing patterns we'll talk about more later when we talk about wall assembly, but this is pretty much how you would lay out your wall and the names of all the different framing members. Okay, so now let's talk about how you actually go through and build the walls for Habitat. You saw how I've laid out the walls, the framing members, and you saw how to do those. A doorway is pretty much the same thing as a window. It just doesn't have the rough sill and the cripples, so you know how to do doors as well. But as far as like how many nails, where to put them, the order of how to do everything is laid out by this rubric. So what you see is that you get a wall task and you get a group number. Your group has people in the group, and each person puts their name at the top of a stage. Now these stages don't have to necessarily be done in this order. Sometimes you can do a couple stages at the same time. So like cutting the plates, and then someone could lay them out after they're cut. So stage 1 has to happen before stage 2, but someone could be making the header while all that happens. So stage 3 can go on at the same time as stage 1. Stage 4, the king studs and trimmers are a little bit hard to do without the header, but you could still kind of figure it out. The ladders and the sills and the California corners can all kind of be done before, you know, stage 2's all the way complete as well. So there's a lot of things you can do simultaneously to be effective as a group. As a group, you're going to get a deadline. And so at the deadline, however many phases you have complete before the deadline is how many points you get. So there's 7 stages here. And so if the deadline hits and you only have stage 5 completed, you get a 5 out of 7 for everyone in the group. But you also get an individual grade. And so here you can see like Christina was in charge of headers. And so we didn't get to her finishing yet, but you can see that individually, Christina is responsible for how this is made. And so she could get a strike if she gets it wrong and then has to redo it and get another strike, and then actually ultimately get a grade out of 5 individually. If she nails it on the first try, she'll get a 5 out of 5. All right, now you'll see that there's inspections. So on each inspection, he has to get it right. If he doesn't, he gets a strike, has to go back for re-inspection. And then at the end, we approve it and you get your score. When you're done with the whole card and you're done with all the walls, you give this to Mr. Liepert and he takes a picture of it. That's me. And that represents your individual score, and then also at the deadline, your group score, how far you got. So even though, let's say Christina is working on stage 3, other people can help her. She's just responsible for how that one turns out. So before you call over a teacher for inspection, Christina has to improve stage 3 before it gets inspected. Okay, so essentially it starts with cutting your plates, then marking out your plates, which we just showed how to do, then creating your headers. So you would read through this, tells you how many nails and what order, and this is a side view of the header, the 2 2x10s stacked on top of a 2x6, and then how to assemble then your doorway with your king studs attached to the header, and then you bump your trimmers underneath and you cut them where they poke out, and then making your ladders, making your California corners. If it's a window, you put in a rough sill and cripples. If not, you leave it open for a doorway, and then assembling everything.